Ready, Set, Hurricane 96 is brought to you in part by Winn-Dixie, Blockbuster Video, Hearst, Crystal Springs Water, and Shoma Homes.
From June to November, people who live on the Atlantic and Gulf coasts in this country are under siege. It is a fact of nature. We can stick our heads in the sand and pretend that there's nothing that we can do. Or we can decide to live in fear, waiting for the worst to happen. This program is about taking control, educating ourselves, taking action, and developing a plan that will allow us peace of mind and prepare us all to be able to defend ourselves. The price we pay to live in such a beautiful part of the world is dealing with one of the most powerful forces in nature, the hurricane.
Hi, I'm NBC6 meteorologist David Damian, and welcome to Ready, Set, Hurricane 96. Who can forget the images of Hurricane Andrew and its devastation of 4 years ago? I'm in downtown Homestead, one of the communities hardest hit by Andrew. Although this community has made a dramatic recovery, the psychological damage for many will take some time to heal. Hurricane Andrew was an event that changed many lives.
Rain doesn't bother me, thunder doesn't bother me, but the sound of wind will bother me at times, because it's something you don't ever forget.
It was just unbelievable to see the destruction that had occurred here. It was, there's no words really to describe the feeling. You're just stunned, completely stunned.
I really prefer not to talk about it because I get too emotional and goosebumps.
My husband watching the windows what happened, and we live across the park, the Continental Park, and he said the trees, go like this, and it was horrible. He said, look on the window, I don't want to look because I'm so afraid.
It was very different from the day I left. So, where is my street? I don't see the street. No street light, no signs, no nothing, so it was hard to come back to. Very hard.
How busy will the 1996 hurricane season be? That is the job for hurricane researchers and climatologists to figure out every year. Among the most notable of all the researchers and predictors is Dr. William Gray of Colorado State University. His forecasts over the last recent years are so accurate, they're legendary.
I think hurricanes is a major future threat facing us.
Dr. William Gray and his team of researchers use global climate data such as pressure, rainfall, and winds to forecast cyclical hurricane patterns.
Last year, all the factors were very favorable for storms, particularly the surface pressure was very low. This year, we know already that the stratospheric winds will not be favorable for storms.
His process is difficult to follow, even for professional weather forecasters. But his predictions have been disturbingly accurate, especially evident when he predicted the probability of a major hurricane in 1992. I asked him about this year's hurricane season.
We're calling for 11 named storms, 7 hurricanes, but only 2 major ones. That is, the forecast is for a season to be a little bit above the long-term average, but much less active than last year.
Dr. Gray's predictions are one of many tools that hurricane specialists use to forecast storm activity. His adjusted forecast for this year comes on June 6th.
Now let's check in with somebody who's been tracking hurricanes longer than anyone else in South Florida.
It's not surprising that Hurricane Andrew caught us by surprise. There hadn't been a major hurricane pass through South Florida in 27 years. A storm is considered major if it's a Category 3 or higher. Before Andrew, the last major hurricane to make landfall here was Betsy in 1965. Tropical storm activity seems to travel in patterns with above normal activity in the 1930s, the 40s, and the early 60s. Now, in the middle of the 90s, everything again points to another upswing.
We've had this long downturn, about 25 years or so. It is almost for sure that it's going to turn back again, and we're going to have more active, intense storms, and almost assuredly more intense landfalling storms.
South Florida has always been a magnet for meteorological drama. During the past 110 years, over 180 tropical storms or hurricanes have hit Florida. In 1906, a powerful hurricane passed over the Florida Keys, killing 100 workers building Flagler's Overseas Railroad. The late teens and early 20s was a boom time for Miami developers, but you can be sure hurricanes were not mentioned in their sales brochures. The Great Hurricane of 1926 brought that boom to a sudden and tragic end. On the evening of September 17th, the storm rolled in. The next morning, citizens woke to sunny skies, drifted out from their battered homes, but unfortunately, there was no radio or TV to alert them that they were in the very eye of the storm. The back wall of the storm hit them again, catching many citizens out on the causeway or away from their homes surveying the damage. 243 people died and the city devastated. In 1928, a Category 4 hurricane passes over Palm Beach County, causing dikes to break on Lake Okeechobee. Almost 2,000 people drowned in the flood. On Labor Day 1935 in the Keys, a compact but extremely intense hurricane sets the record as the strongest storm ever to hit the U.S., estimated to have sustained winds of over 200 miles per hour, over 400 died. From 1945 to 1950, 7 smaller hurricanes hit South Florida, then there's a 10-year lull. A new wave of hurricanes arrived starting with Donna in 1960. This Category 4 hurricane lashes through the Keys before it cuts a path of destruction north through Florida. And the storms kept coming.
I think that Hurricane Ethel is probably affecting Hurricane Dora to some extent.
In 1964, Hurricane Cleo, a relatively minor hurricane, passes over Miami and Fort Lauderdale with 110-mile-per-hour winds, but does over $125 million in damage. Hurricane Betsy in 1965 hit the Upper Keys and South Dade with 140-mile-per-hour winds, killing 13 people. Then there was another lull. 14 years passed before South Florida is hit again. This time Hurricane David. It did $95 million in damage in Palm Beach in 1979. 13 more years go by before a hurricane pays another visit to South Florida, a storm considered small, dry, and powerful with sustained winds at 150 miles per hour. This storm, however, sets the record as the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. Over $30 billion in damage. It's Hurricane Andrew. History teaches us that hurricane activity is cyclical, but even more important, hurricanes are a very real part of life here in Florida. They've been here many times before, and they'll be back. It's just a matter of time.
When we come back, we'll explore how to make a comprehensive hurricane plan for you and your family, which makes living in a hurricane zone and dealing with this potential threat every year a whole lot easier. How many of you think that if a hurricane is going to hit, your best course of action is to maybe travel north to Orlando or even to the West Coast? Well, that's your thinking. You may be in for a big surprise because in the end, there is no telling just where a hurricane will end up. The best thing for you to do for both safety and peace of mind is develop a plan, your personal hurricane plan.
Your personal hurricane plan starts with the realization that a major storm can and probably will hit us again.
The one thing that was frustrating as a public official and remains frustrating as someone who's still in the emergency management services business is the apathy, the unwillingness of people to own up to the fact that calamity could be right offshore, that there are things that we can do, little investments we can make to buy a tremendous amount of protection for ourselves.
The plan is long range. You know, shutters are the primary thing for the house, but everybody has to have a personal plan.
The plan should include distributing emergency telephone numbers to family members and providing safe places for documents and valuables.
Get everything you need right now, make the plan, decide what you're going to do, have a backup plan in case that doesn't work. For example, if you're going to leave and go to a friend's house and suddenly the friend's out of town, have a backup plan.
The plan consists on knowing where you're going to go if you live in an evacuation zone, and also having a well-prepared and well-stocked hurricane supply kit, which includes at least 2 weeks' supply of food and water.
In that kit are the important things you have to make sure that you can get through 2 weeks being by yourself without any county support. Food, water, clothing, safety items, first aid kit, those kind of things. They're all listed in the Ready Set Hurricane brochure.
Your plan might need to include making arrangements to shelter people with special medical needs.
These are shelters for people who are not sick enough to be in a hospital, but they're certainly not able to go into a Red Cross shelter.
People who need such assistance must register with your county Special Needs Services Department now, not when a hurricane is on its way. People who own boats need to have in their plans a timeline in getting them to a safe place, because if you wait to the last minute, you may be out of luck.
When we're to the point where we figure the storm will be hitting or the hurricane force winds will be arriving in 8 hours, lockdown of the bridge will be ordered.
And don't forget about a plan for your pets. Helpful tips on all these subjects can be found in this year's Ready, Set Hurricane Preparedness booklet. One of the main objectives of a hurricane plan is to make you so well organized that if you have to evacuate, you're ready to leave immediately. Next time around, traffic might be your worst enemy. More on that later.
There is no substitute for having a personal hurricane plan. That plan then guides you through that process of getting ready, of implementing your plan, and of being prepared to survive in the aftermath of a hurricane.
Basically, anxiety is fear of the unknown and fear of not being able to handle something. So if you have some expectation of what's going to happen and you have some knowledge about what can occur and you develop a plan, that would absolutely lessen your anxiety significantly, because then you would be in control.
Hurricane Andrew produced countless stories of courage and resilience and taught us many things about surviving hurricanes. Here's Lori Miller with one family's story.
Country Walk is a planned community that seemed to have everything the American dream promised.
They were taken the day that the hurricane came, and I took them for insurance purposes. Basically of each room. And like my older son's room was just decorated.
Then, on August 24th, 1992, that dream turned into a nightmare.
These pictures are the ones taken the day after the hurricane, and they look a lot different. My husband was working, so I was encouraged, he encouraged me to go to a friend's house, the only neighbor in on the block that had shutters. So that's where I took my son Timothy and Devin. Timothy at the time was 2.5 and Devin was a newborn. They had shutters everywhere but on their garage door and their front door. And when the hurricane became very intense, it blew their front door in. And when it blew their front door in, they lost their roof. And their house ended up looking very much like ours.
So now that you've gone through Hurricane Andrew, you're planning early and you've already got your safe room picked out.
Right.
This is the closet, I guess, that you're going to make your safe room now.
Yes, this is where we would be.
And so you're going to stock it. Tell us a little bit about how you're going to stock your room.
We would put food, extra clothing, definitely shoes for everyone. That's the one thing that we didn't have last time that we really needed was shoes. We were walking around in all this debris barefooted. This is going to be our safe room, and this is very similar to the closet where we rode out the hurricane, Hurricane Andrew. And I don't know if you can imagine, but it was quite an experience because we had a family of 4 plus my son, my infant, and my toddler and myself. And we were all crunched in with clothes and everything hanging over us, and it was quite an experience. I certainly hope I'll never see another Andrew in my lifetime. It taught us a lot of valuable lessons, including that anything can happen and you have to be prepared.
We learn from the experiences of people like Julie. We see the necessity of having a safe room. An interior room away from windows, such as a bathroom, closet, or hallway. The safe room should be stocked with survival items, such as flashlights, extra batteries, battery-operated radio or TV, food and water, sleeping bags or blankets and pillows, extra clothes, and as Julie learned, extra shoes. Have a mattress ready to move into your safe room. You might need it to put over your heads if the going gets rough. And now is the time to trim trees away from the house. Don't trim trees when a hurricane is on its way. Loose trimmings will blow around, becoming even more dangerous.
Thank you, Lori. When we come back, we'll take a look at the ins and outs of evacuation. I'm at the Burger King World Headquarters in Cutler Ridge. This is the spot where Hurricane Andrew made landfall. The damage to this building, $25 million, is an awesome testimony to the power of a hurricane. Hurricane Andrew had a 15-foot storm surge. Storm surge is that dome of water that is pushed up ahead of the storm by the hurricane onto the coastal areas. As a matter of fact, where I'm standing right now is completely underwater, and the water level actually reached to the second floor of this parking deck, with waves breaking on top of that. National Weather Service statistics over the years show that about 90% of all hurricane fatalities are caused by storm surge. This is especially important to consider, especially if you live along a coastal area. Think about what 15 feet of water can do to your home.
When the warning flags go up, a hurricane will be 24 hours away. Where will you be? It's a question you need to answer now that you've got time.
People need to have their own hurricane plan, their family plan, know what their destination is going to be when they evacuate.
A very important part of this is to make sure that the family exercises their plan. Parents need to talk with their children, make sure that they understand what's going on.
Your own home is the best place to ride out the storm, provided it's shuttered and secure.
If you don't need to evacuate, you probably shouldn't.
But many residents in Dade, Broward, and Monroe will have to evacuate, especially those who live near the coast or in a mobile home.
We would hope to try to evacuate the upper keys or get it started prior to the evacuation of the middle and the lower keys. This way, it will prevent a gridlock.
All three counties constantly update their plans and maps using studies and lessons learned from previous storms.
The latest change that was done was several years back when they developed the slosh model.
Some areas in Broward especially need to evacuate in a worst-case scenario.
We have it in 3 levels. There's a 1-2 category storm. That's our first level of evacuation. Then we go to a category 3, and then finally to 4 and 5 categories.
Miami Beach has also developed a case scenario map. The blue area indicates floods in a category 1 storm.
As you can see, in a Hurricane 3, all the yellow zones of Miami Beach will go underwater. That's almost everything except Mount Sinai area.
These maps tell it like it is. Most hurricane-related deaths are caused by drowning.
That's the killer. And we know that from past experience. We want those people off the coast.
Folks who need to evacuate should try to seek shelter in a hurricane-safe home of a friend or family member who lives in a non-evacuation zone. Public shelter space throughout South Florida is limited and should be considered only as a last resort. But if you absolutely need to go, make sure you take items the shelter may not provide: a blanket and pillow, non-perishable food and water for each member of the family, and any prescription medicine and toiletries. Remember, no pets will be allowed in shelters. Whatever you do, don't wait until the last minute to draw up a plan. It's simple. Be prepared, stay alive.
To evacuate over 1 million people is a difficult and very serious situation. Much was learned after Hurricanes Andrew and Aaron. It is critical to know when to leave or when not to leave. Here's Susan Wallace with more on the perils of being on the road before and during a hurricane.
Right here, traffic is completely blocked off.
During Andrew, we found out the hard way. If you're going to get out, you gotta get out early. This season, emergency planners say plot your evacuation now.
In the midst of all the chaos, that's not a good time to start planning what you're going to do.
South Florida roadways are simply not equipped to handle a mass exodus. 20 northbound lanes in Miami, narrow to just 8 by the time you get to Palm Beach County. Some South Floridians say they would drive north even if it means they won't get far.
You prefer traffic rather than staying at home?
Yes, I am afraid to be here.
But emergency planners are really afraid to have drivers here at the height of a storm.
You could literally have thousands of people trapped, and you could lose hundreds or maybe thousands of lives. So that's the big fear.
And in the Panhandle last season, it was almost the reality. As Hurricane Opal prepared to slam into the northwest Florida coastline, thousands and thousands of residents left too late. They were at a dead stop on every roadway leading from the shore.
And thank God it tore itself apart before it made it on shore, or it would have been a very high death toll.
We can give you a taste of what it's like to be stuck in your car during a hurricane, thanks to the experience and videotape of a WTVJ crew that was caught in their car at the height of Andrew.
Careful, 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 careful.
You can see why these veteran Miami reporters lost their way.
Looks like you're on US 1, just past 32nd Avenue.
With winds of 160 plus miles an hour, signs crashing around them, they had to depend on lightning flashes to find landmarks. Eventually, they found safety under the Metro Rail, a shelter of last resort. Emergency officials say you too should aim for if you're caught in such chaos.
You can hope to get under an underpass, hope that will help you, hope that you can get out to find a safe structure someplace near the highway. But if you're in that car, when those winds strike, the only thing you can do is pray.
When we come back, we'll take a look to see what you should have in your family's hurricane kit. And we're keeping an eye on this very well-organized depression, and this could become this year's first named storm. That's a fairly common weather report during the heart of hurricane season, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. It's actually a call to action. What should you do when we report the different phases of tropical activity? Here's NBC6's Maria Gennaro with a report on putting your plan into action at the first report of a potential threat.
You know, really, we're pretty lucky here in South Florida because we usually know days ahead of time when a storm is expected to move closer to our shores. And when it does, the National Hurricane Center will issue an advisory to emergency management officials who will then activate phase 1 of their own emergency readiness plan.
Probably 96 hours out, we'll actually activate a level 1 activation here in the office.
We go into action immediately upon hearing that there's a depression or even a tropical wave.
Your own hurricane plan should work much the same way. Now, on the first report of a storm nearing, there are a number of things that you should be doing. First of all, plan to keep in touch with family members. Also, review contact numbers and double-check supplies. Be sure to double-check your arrangements if you're in an evacuation zone. And stay tuned to TV and radio updates on the storm's progress.
Even though a storm is 800 miles or 1,000 miles away, it can be essentially on a track toward us.
If you haven't already done so, now's the time to make sure your hurricane kit is in order. This is what a well-stocked hurricane kit looks like for a family of 4. Emergency management officials recommend enough food and water be stocked per person for 2 weeks. That's about 7 gallons of water per person, and as you can see here, that's a lot of water. Have plenty of canned and non-perishable foods, flashlights, batteries, a battery-operated television or radio, a first aid kit, battery-powered lanterns, and a tarp. And don't forget baby food, pet foods, extra supplies of medical prescriptions, because pharmacies may not be open for a while after a hurricane. A detailed checklist of the most commonly needed supplies can be found in WTVJ's Ready, Set, Hurricane Preparedness Manual that came in today's Miami Herald and is offered free at all Winn-Dixie and Blockbuster video stores throughout South Florida. We've worked hard to make sure this booklet is the most comprehensive hurricane preparedness manual available. It lists emergency numbers, evacuation maps, shelter locations in Dade, Broward, and Monroe counties, and much more. Get yourself a copy and keep it as an essential part of your hurricane kit.
I decided that I was going to stay because my house is very old. It was built in the 20s, and I figured since it lasted through the other hurricanes that it would last well through this one. Then it really started picking up like in waves. It would come hard and then stop and then come hard and stop, and they were getting worse and worse. It really started getting bad about 2 in the morning. I had a few paintings that I was saving, 2 really good ones. One of them is right up here that made it through the storm. And I took my heavy leather couches and I made I put the 2 couches and I put a box spring over them. And the wood of the box spring, I hold it like this, is a corner of the roof blew off. Then the other corner of the roof blew off, and the wind was cutting through the house. And it was so scary. We all had a religious experience in Homestead.
After Hurricane Andrew, building codes went through sweeping changes affecting construction techniques, storm shutter designs, roofs, and doors. Almost everything was reevaluated. Here's a report from Lori Miller on what we've learned and what our government is doing about it.
The big lesson that Hurricane Andrew taught us was that many of the buildings that we live and work in will not survive a major hurricane.
We'll probably see hurricane damage like has never before been seen because of the great buildup in property values along the southeast U.S. coast since the last active period. So I think that's a rather ominous trend for the future.
This is not surprising to structural engineer Herbert Saffer, who in the 1960s conducted research for the United Nations on hurricane destructive capabilities. His 5 categories of wind force and its effect on buildings became the Saffir-Simpson scale, used throughout the world to rate hurricanes.
The categories were just broken down basically by the type of structural damage that could occur in each category. For instance, a Category 1 hurricane, the damage might be limited to shrubs knocked over, and signs knocked over, things of that type. The Category 5, which is the most severe, would have extremely major structural damage.
In 1994, sweeping changes were enacted by Dade County to ensure that buildings offer greater protection against hurricane wind forces.
The force goes up in a geometrical progression. So, for instance, if the wind velocity doubles from, say, 50 miles per hour to 100 miles per hour, the equivalent force would be 4 times as much.
You're never going to be able to build something that will take a Category 5 hurricane, but you can build something that will give you protection, that can take a wind, strong wind, and still will be standing up.
These new tough codes are not without their critics.
We've always been criticized that we're taking the affordability away, that the young people nowadays won't be able to have their dream home. How good is to make something substandard and it's going to blow away with the first wind, and you're going to no home, the dream is gone anyway.
My biggest concern is complacency. Most people don't realize what can happen, and this applies to architects and engineers also.
We live in a place where the weather can be extreme. Our building codes now take that into account.
When we come back, we'll take a look at products designed to stand up to hurricanes. National Hurricane Center has just issued a hurricane watch for Broward County, for Dade County, and for the Upper Keys. Most of us know what it's like to hear that, especially last year when there was seemingly an endless number of hurricanes pinwheeling towards us. When a hurricane watch is issued, we still don't know where the storm will end up. Most never make landfall, but you can't ignore it. It's the second call to action. Maria Gennaro takes us through part 2 of the plan.
A hurricane watch means that the hurricane could hit our area within 36 hours.
We're going to gas up all the county vehicles. We're going to get those special care shelters ready, get the phones in place, get the radios all checked out, all of those kinds of things, all being done in that watch period.
When you hear this, you should be securing your boat, moving outdoor furniture and yard items inside, rolling up rugs and storing above floor level, covering furniture with plastic, stocking up on last-minute supplies. Also, get a week's amount of cash, fuel up your cars, and if you live in an evacuation zone, this is the time to get your shutters up, because if the next phase is called, you'll soon be on your way out of the evacuation zone.
The most important thing you can do to safeguard your home is to protect it from the wind. Here's a report on what you should know about hurricane shutters and other interesting products designed to keep the wind out.
Hurricane Andrew taught us the most important thing you can do to protect your home is to cover the openings where the wind can get in. Without any type of protection, windows and doors are likely to fail, allowing hurricane-force winds to rush through your house. This pressure from under the roof can cause disastrous results. Hurricane Andrew taught us a great deal about the efficiency of storm shutters and how they act to protect our homes. Many failed under the old code because they didn't factor in impact from flying objects. Now they do.
I don't think there's any code anywhere that provides the protection to the citizens that we provide down here.
With Dade County setting the pace in wind protection, manufacturers are striving to meet code qualifications with a whole new group of products. Shutters, doors, windows, and even skylights must pass impact tests able to withstand the force of an 8-foot-long 2x4 traveling at 34 miles per hour. None of the products sold before 1994 passed this tough new test. For protection of most existing homes, shutters are still the best option.
Shutters have come down in prices below the prices that were before Hurricane Andrew.
And now, because of the new codes, they're much better made. Your least expensive option, but unfortunately most labor-intensive option, is the panel. Now there's even a high-impact plastic panel that's lightweight and lets light through, a major benefit. Accordion and roll-up shutters have gone through significant design changes since Andrew, making them extremely strong, yet very easy to use. A line of colonial and Bahama shutters have even been approved for those looking for a more decorative way to protect your windows.
Solid clear Flexan glass.
Laminated glass and high-tech plastics are also making their way into the hurricane protection marketplace, offering protection without the need for shutters.
Along with making sure that your home is covered by approved storm shutters is making sure that it is covered in another important way. Here's Ike Siemens with an update on the state of insurance.
Homeowner insurance is supposed to help pay to fix your home in a catastrophe. The goal of the state of Florida right now is to fix the homeowners insurance industry.
A high-risk coastal area for hurricanes is always going to be a problem.
The State Joint Underwriters Association, the JUA, was created after insurance companies bailed out of the state after Hurricane Andrew, leaving 850,000 policyholders abandoned.
Floridians should understand that the JUA is a holding place, and it does have the same kind of insurance coverage for your same kind of home that it does in the private sector. It's not a company that's been around for 30 years or 40 years or 100 years. So it starts out with zero capital, zero surplus, and only a deficit based upon the cash flow.
The cost of a JUA policy is, by law, very high. The idea is to attract more insurance companies to write policies here so that competition will help to lower premiums and improve coverage.
We are the only state in the country that has set aside a reserve catastrophe fund as a means of making Florida more attractive to insurance companies.
Next year, we will be able to have even more of an impact because we'll be able to spend a portion of the state catastrophic fund on mitigation of property. That is where homeowners will be able to take out some guaranteed loans or no interest or low interest loans to put hurricane shutters on their home.
As we speak, 250,000 policies are coming out of the JUA over the course of the next several months. I have just completed negotiations late last night on another 130,000 policies coming out. So by the end of this year, we are going to have cut that JUA down in half.
Any new company that agrees to write policies in the state has to keep those policies for at least 3 years.
Now, if another monster hurricane comes, all bets are off. And we'll deal with what we have to deal with. But if we have the good fortune to get through this hurricane season, and it's supposed to be an active one, we'll be well on our way to recovery at the end of the year.
After Andrew, Florida residents lost the luxury of relying on an insurance policy to protect against catastrophic losses. Much of the effort and the cost is now our responsibility. We must protect our homes every way we can because insurance may not be there like it used to be.
When we come back, we'll take a look at what's new at the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane warnings are now in effect for Dade County, for Broward County, and now to the north into Palm Beach County.
When we get to the warning, we need to bring all of our preparations to conclusion. At that point, it's too late to start anything. At that point, you hunker down.
Well, a hurricane warning means that a hurricane is likely to hit within 24 hours. Orders to evacuate are not far behind. Your shutters should be on. Fill your bathtub with water. Super chlorinate your pool and let some of the water out. Freeze jugs of water and make sure your pets are taken care of. Also, call distant relatives and tell them what your plans are. Be sure to unplug any unnecessary appliances and be ready to evacuate.
I'm here at the National Hurricane Center on the campus of Florida International University. As you recall, they moved from their old location on US 1 out to here last year in 1995. And what a way to open up a new facility. Tell you what, 19 named storms, 11 of them were hurricanes, 5 of them were major hurricanes. And because of last year's experience, the forecasters here are much better prepared to handle what nature may throw our way this year.
The synopsis is perfect.
Hurricane specialists at the National Hurricane Center are responsible for forecasting storms for both the Atlantic Basin and the Eastern Pacific. Here on the East Coast, many storms are tracked as they leave the coast of Africa as much as 10 to 14 days before reaching Florida.
Our number one job is to get up a watch and a warning. And a watch is 36 hours before we think the storm will affect an area. A warning is 24 hours before we think a storm will affect an area.
Forecast updates are issued every 6 hours when a tropical system becomes a depression or a named storm. If land is threatened, intermediate advisories are issued every 3 hours.
Now we have a solid suite of 2 of the geostationary satellites that nicely look over the whole area. We have a new jet aircraft that will actually fly the vicinity of the storm, collecting data so we can get an estimate of what the environment's going to do to the storm, how it's going to make it move, and how it's going to change its intensity.
But despite all the technology, nature is not easy to predict.
With all the color satellite pictures on TV and the radar loops and the computers that we have, people think that we do a lot better job of forecasting than we actually do. And the truth is that the average forecast error in 24 hours is about 100 miles. So what that means is that we could be forecasting a hurricane to hit down the lower Keys or up near the Cape, and it could still hit Miami 24 hours later.
This hurricane season, we'll see entirely new graphics that are designed to better represent the size, path, and uncertainty of storms.
This is Hurricane Aaron, and its track as it came across Florida and then back out into the Gulf and then into the Panhandle. Red shows the swath of hurricane force winds, and the gold color shows the swath of tropical storm force winds. So the reason for this, Dave, is to try to give people an idea of the size of the storm so that they're not just thinking of it as a single point moving along.
These new maps illustrate how wide an area is being threatened.
The purpose of this is to show the uncertainty in the track forecast. Our track forecast is along like this, and these are probabilities. So 100% probability that it'll be back here in the red area, 50% probability that sometime within the next 3 days it will be in this area. This is a 20% probability and a 10% probability. So it gives you the idea that there's a broad area threatened, and this is why when we put up a hurricane warning, we have to put up a warning for larger area than will actually be hit.
Hurricane Center meteorologists are the critical link to emergency management officials when a hurricane is threatening our shores.
We have instituted a system where we bring emergency management people into the building here to act as a liaison to improve communications between us and the emergency management people.
We still want everybody to listen very carefully to their local emergency management officials. If they're told to evacuate, they need to go ahead and do so immediately.
As the hurricane season progresses, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more from the scientists at the Hurricane Center, and we'll be feeling a little better just knowing they're there.
Let's take a look at why it's so important for all of us to work together for hurricane preparedness.
It's not just ourselves we need to make sure are ready. We need to make sure that as a community, everybody's getting ready.
Chrissy Trigger of Coconut Grove spent weeks after Hurricane Andrew going house to house helping older people who were stuck in their homes.
I went there and they had old milk and old bananas and old bread. I went around their neighbors and got them to donate fruit and vegetables and some bread and a little bit from everybody.
When there is again hurricane season, people are going to come up and are going to start remembering some of the things that happened. But they will also remember the fact that there were neighbors there, that there were, you know, the authorities that helped.
In the event of another hurricane, Chrissy Trigger knows what she's going to do for the old folks she knows will stay in their homes.
Block them in with something, you know, give them food, give them books to read or whatever, you know. That's what I do. And then go knock on the door afterwards and say, are you all right?
Groups and organizations can be another valuable link to hurricane preparedness.
We haven't gone very far yet with the homeowners association or with the condo associations, but that is a plan. We've got that as part of our 5-year strategic plan to get closer to the people through these organizations.
Perhaps someday we'll see family refuge referral programs where people who live in evacuation zones are pre-matched and invited to stay with households in safer areas.
I think the thing we need to move more to in the future is more community and private sector involvement, more personal responsibility.
We're all in this together, and we must bond as a community if we are to endure another storm. Being prepared as a community and as individuals is the best defense against nature and our own fears. When we come back, we'll have some final thoughts on life in a hurricane zone.
Ready, Set Hurricane 96 has been brought to you in part by PCA Healthcare, Malin Brothers, Voyo Tropical, Wilkes & McHugh, and Brink Security.
Aaron took a little jog to the north and missed us, and so we all got up the next day sort of with mixed feelings, but that's a good feeling. It's a good feeling to have been missed. It's like waking up and saying, gee, I didn't use my life insurance last night.
So, you've installed expensive storm shutters, you put together a well-stocked hurricane kit, you develop a plan and follow it to the letter. And then the hurricane bypasses South Florida. I know a lot of you will say, well, that's the last time I'll go through all that. It's not the right attitude. This is the last part of the plan, except that the threat of hurricanes are a real part of our lives here in South Florida. Hurricanes will hit us again. It's just a matter of time. Make your plan a way of life. Then it doesn't have to be such a huge chore every year. What it takes is being smart. We as a community have to pull together and organize. We're all in this together, and we will survive. I'm David Damian. From all of us in the news department here at NBC6, thank you for joining us, and make sure that you stay tuned this hurricane season.